Let's rejoin the conversation for part 3 of my interview with Professor Christoph Benzmueller.
Yeah, I want to maybe follow up a bit on a point that you made earlier that I thought was very interesting. With you mentioned that as people have been creating different logics, that then you'd see a sort of set of follow-up papers about what paradoxes or problems are possible in that logic. And what I still see a lot of work, especially even in stuff that's being married now with machine learning, where people are taking a knowledge representation approach that's not grounded in a particular logic. It's more like they kind of invent their own formalism and just figure it's going to work. And I wonder if you could say a few words about, what's the value of choosing a particular mathematical logic where everything has kind of been worked out?
Yeah, the benefit in the end is at multiple levels. I mean, in the end, if you have such a kind of methodological approach where you start with one formalism, then in the end, that means you also get proofs represented in that one formalism. It's only that one layer you in the end have to believe in or trust in. And that is where you verify your argument. So the likelihood that something goes wrong in the sense of that you support inferences that you don't want to support in the end, which could have tremendous impact on real life decisions if we employ them in context of modern AI technology, is minimal in that regard. And if you build up ad hoc knowledge representation formalisms, then well, what is the notion of verification? What is the logical principles you are verifying against with? If you take the methodological approach instead, you always have to make sure that whenever you embed a new logic formalism, that you really make sure that this new logic formalism is clearly what you want to support. But they come typically with papers, with good evidence, with good support, with clearly specified semantics. And that is all exploited then in the approach. And in the end, you just have, as I said, one proof in a base logic. That also applies now to the integration of different T improving or different concrete T improvers, let's say under the hood of one integrated system. In the end, you should be it should be possible to translate all these kind of contributions into an homogeneous proof object. And you see these ideas being reflected and supported in recent T improvers, but there's much more work needed, especially on the engineering side, in the technological forefront. I think therefore, as I said, so the time is somehow ripe to invest a bit on a larger scale in that direction, because now we are more or less challenged by integrating all these wonderful tools that we have developed, including also this wonderful set solving technology, which, as I mentioned, is typically then again under the hood of first order T improvers or directly applicable also in some of these proof assistant systems. And even with set solving technology, we have recently seen solutions of open mathematical problems, right? So there's this wonderful work by Marian Heuler and colleagues who solved open mathematical questions where, say, subsymbolic AI and machine learning technique is not applicable yet, as far as I know. And there you see this enormous potential if you provide environments in which you have access to all of these wonderful reasoning tools in one framework, and that is what we need.
Yeah, the sort of layering of SAT solver to first order solver to higher order solver seems to be like a sort of a natural progression here that's happening. Yeah. So, well, maybe again I can shift gears, and you've been working in this area of higher order logic for a considerable period of time, and you're also, I would say, one of a very small community of researchers that not only work in the theory of the logic, but actually very actively in the practical implementation of systems that work with these logics. And so I thought I might ask, how did you get started in all this? What were your major career influences?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was at the beginning of the 90s when I really got attracted to automated theorem proving, and then shortly after, in particular, to higher order automated theorem proving, because I found that particularly challenging. I mean, it was, in the end, it was Jörg Siegmann with his AI lecture, in which he actually confronted us with the idea that there's a most interesting time now where we will see the rise of super intelligent systems. Actually, that is what he claimed in the lecture, that will replace humans, not just in particular applications, but on a larger scale. And he wanted to, of course, be provocative and so on. And he was successful with me, because it changed my life. I thought, no way, I don't believe that. We humans are superior and so on. We can do more than computers, and it won't be the case. But I wanted to study it. I wanted to know, can you refute the claim eventually? And for me, it was clear that looking into the automation of higher order reasoning, or in general mathematical reasoning, and at the time would be one most important area to provide an answer to this question. So if you can do, let's say, very ambitious mathematical reasoning automatically, then so my thinking would provide good evidence for superiority of machines eventually at some point. Well, I'm still skeptical, but I think we can go a long way. And that got me into the area. So I got fascinated and then started to implement theorem provers in my PhD thesis. I was also kind of responsible at the time for the Omega group, where we were developing an interactive theorem proving environment in which we also integrated automated theorem provers, first order, and I was developing then higher order theorem prover to be tightly integrated. That was the PhD topic, and I was highly influenced on my way by people like Peter Andrews, but I also talked a lot to many others. I mean, also Larry Paulson was very important, because the Leo 2 prover was then developed later on in Cambridge. There were influential people like Alan Bundy, who had a focus on induction. And induction, of course, is a higher order principle and not easy to automate. And he looked into the automation of induction. That was interesting for me. There was an interaction with Frank Fanning at the time. And he is, of course, a higher order person as well, Dale Miller and so on. But also at SRI, close contacts to Schenker and Richard Waldinger and so on, that were influential. And recently I got a lot of influence actually in practical applications, again in mathematics, for instance, in category theory, by close interaction with Dana Scott. So I really have a very tight interaction with him, and also jointly supervised thesis projects that are very interesting, and where we try to actually encode foundations of mathematics, and in particular here category theory, using an encoding of free logic in higher order logic. So another non-classical logic as a basis for then putting on top of that a very elegant formalization of category theory. So there are many persons here that influenced me a lot in what I'm doing and in what I have done in the past. And I guess I have even forgotten now to mention a few that were highly relevant here. Of course, Michael Kohlhase should be mentioned. He was a co-advisor of my PhD work, and also a higher order person. And recently also this interesting application-oriented collaborations with the persons in Brazil and Luxembourg. So in Brazil on para-consistent logic, and in Luxembourg on the ontic reasoning. So this is also highly influential for my work. Yeah.
Wow, that's a great overview, and it's exciting to have had so many people that have helped you form your career, whose names that I've heard over and over again. So it's great to sort of look back and take stock of all the people that have contributed to you individually and to the field in general. So maybe this is a good transition to ask, where do you see the field going? What's next in higher order reasoning and mathematics?
I think we still have a few interesting aspects to address. I mean, the old challenge still to get kind of computation and reasoning tightly integrated is still not suitably or appropriately solved. So we had the Calculamus network at the time. There's recent progress in the direction, but it's still not, let's say, as good developed as it eventually should be. So I really think about how to compute within an theorem prover, say about rationals or whatever, and to convert these computations into proofs and to flexibly interleave computation and reasoning and so on. So that's still a very challenging aspect. Another fascinating direction is what Joseph actually is doing and invented in collaboration with others, the direction of integrating machine learning techniques into theorem proving. I think at the moment we are exploring our search spaces still mainly with symbolic means or with syntactical means, and to try to learn from past experience what a good direction in exploring the search spaces is an obvious idea. And I'm also personally convinced that it will work. It might be more difficult as one initially thinks of, but I think that's a very interesting direction. Also then in terms of integrating in general subsymbolic and symbolic techniques. But the other way around, I also find interesting. How can you eventually really do what some folks do, try to learn rules of logic from I would say what you need is an homogeneous starting point and not an arbitrary library of mathematical textbooks or so on for doing that. But then what I think unfortunately got us in the wrong direction is to focus as a community, that we focus too long, say mainly or with high preference in the direction of supporting mathematicians. This is of course in the long run very relevant, but let's say I came to the conclusion that there are way more pressing fields right now than supporting mathematicians, who anyway don't want to be supported because we are at the same time attacking their kind of superiority claims on mathematical reasoning with automated theorem proving technologies. So some of them probably don't even want to be attacked in such a way by AI or automated reasoning technology in general, while at the same time they're happy to develop technology that supports these areas, but that eventually also mathematical reasoning in the long run will be targeted by systems is of course not so an appealing idea to some folks in the direction. But then we have these wonderful other application directions, and also very pressing ones, where we, for instance, have to deal now with the questions, with the question of how to build trustful AI systems, how to make sure that AI systems are doing what we want and not behaving kind of chaotically, at least in some unpredictable circumstances and so on. So how can we generally use symbolic reasoning and ATP, so sharp declarative reasoning, to actually control more unreliable but highly efficient AI machine learning technology. And this is for me a way more pressing direction, and also more interesting and also economically more relevant direction than looking for mathematicians to support. That has time, the latter has time. The other one is something we as a community should rather focus on now. And for that, we need non-classical logic to support. And that has for a too long time been largely neglected in the automated theorem proving community, where we mainly focused only on the classical reasoning aspect. So I think that the future is really bright, in particular if the automated reasoning community and theorem proving community in particular looks at these challenging new application directions and adapts its machinery to actually support exactly these kind of applications. And then I think we will see many more also companies becoming highly interested in that sort of technology. And haven't mentioned it at the beginning, I'm at the moment, or since a year, very active in collaborating with companies. So at the moment, I'm interacting with a company that's working in context of blockchain, smart contracts, and putting then on top of that legal reasoning. And I also worked before with a startup company here in Berlin, still collaborating with them, who actually want to tightly integrate symbolic and sub-symbolic reasoning in the area of intelligent search and intelligent organization of knowledge in general. So to put things together in these contexts. And I think we will see in the next years more and more companies who find out that the promise of machine learning is slightly exaggerated, and that for many applications, there's no way around tight integration with symbolic machinery.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So often I think that you know, it's easy for any sort of scientist or engineer to focus on the problems that are most immediately accessible to him or herself. So a lot of people in ATP have very strong math backgrounds. So I guess it's been kind of natural for ADP people to think about and work on solving problems in mathematics. But I agree with you completely that there are many other areas. And so I'm a big fan of what you're doing with your industrial collaboration. It seems to me that a lot of the biggest advances in science come together, happen when different fields, different perspectives come together, whether it's academic or industrial or different fields in academia. So I wish there were more of this sort of thing. And it's great to see you doing exactly that. And you've done a lot of this, including in our own work together, was sort of a marrying of some industrial sensitivities and so an academic perspective.
Yeah, I agree. That was for me actually the first time, and you actually encouraged me to do more of that sort of interactive work with industry. And yeah, right now I'm enjoying this kind of double, say, employment situation a lot, where you have your foots into both directions, and this is highly interesting.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. I mean, you've been very generous with your time, because I know you are incredibly busy these days, doing essentially multiple jobs. And I'm really grateful for the conversation, the explanations, and this sort of peek that we've afforded, hopefully, our listeners into what can be a sometimes difficult or challenging area to understand in terms of both its methods and its relevance. And I like to think that we've at least given people a bit of introduction to that today. So thank you again very much for doing this.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Okay, we'll talk to you soon, Chris.